Alright, I'm back for part 2 here. Got more space on the camera. At least 12 minutes, that should do it. This gave me time to go grab my book real quick, which I mentioned yesterday, The Holographic Universe. That's the one that kind of re-inspired me, and I'm rereading it after 10 years. And it opened up a whole new Pandora's box. And you know what's funny? Let me just stop and say, first off, Pandora's box was about hope. You know, Pandora let out all the demons out of the box, and at the bottom was hope. And that's all we have to hang on to. And hope for us means hope that we will be happy. It's a very simple thing. Humans want to be happy. We want to be content. And there's a certain degree of discontentment out there because of the technologies we've imposed upon ourselves, the limitations we've imposed upon ourselves, our desperate addiction to connection, our will to want to connect with one another is what brought about the internet, chat rooms, and now we've used that tool to help us disconnect. So it's becoming much more difficult. This is something that I've found over and over, that when we're online, people have what they call like the disassociative issue, where they don't have to be themselves. They can be whoever they want, they can say whatever they want, and people tend to say things they wouldn't say otherwise. In other words, if two people are having a religious type discussion or spirituality, people aren't likely to go, oh, you're a fucking idiot, you're delusional, you're dumb shit. But online, people are quick to do that because they want to knock people down. And my point about this is that sometimes discussing these things, even if I say there's a potential for, you know, psychic ability, someone will say, oh no, here we go with the mumbo jumbo again, you know, oh no, another bunch of spiritual crap. It's almost like people are so scared to admit that there may be another invisible field that they've attached to science so intensely that they're not even willing to look at the very science that they support, because many of the scientists are in disagreement, and not all science says there's no spiritual realm, or there's no life after death, or that the brain is what produces the thoughts. The idea of the holographic model is that our brains, yes, they do control the body. They control the body, but it's a three-dimensional, or it's rather a it's rather a holographic type model where the information is sent to our brain. And nobody ever really explains this part of it, so I wanted to explain it a little bit because this helped me understand it. Our brain makes connections. Neurons fire signals, okay? And this is what creates this thought. This is what allows us to see things and understand things. But at the same time, we can see somebody we haven't seen in half a life and still recognize them. Even though they're a totally different person, our brain can pick out the features we do recognize and separate it from the age difference and make that connection. There are several different thought patterns going on with everything that we see and realize. And one of the most amazing things about it is that it seems that, and this is what, when they talk about wave interference patterns, and the double slit experiment, this is that light behaves as a wave, and it goes through both slits, and when it's behaving like a wave, these interference patterns cause matter, let's say. And the whole idea is, I guess in our mind, is that it creates thought. That thought is created by the act of interference patterns. So you have two neurons that are firing, billions of neurons that are firing, but a few neurons in particular fire at a particular rate and a particular frequency. Those interference patterns that are created is what manifests the reality of the thought or the idea. And one can go really deep into this stuff and see that it's not just a few offbeat cuckoo people saying this. These are things that many scientists have come to the same conclusion on through their research, and they didn't want to believe it. Einstein was completely baffled by wanting to set his theory of relativity as being the one, but he couldn't understand it. He spoke with Bohm. There's Bohr and Bohm, and Bohm was really into the quantum realm. He wanted to understand how things manifested, and he has a lot of great work out there. And then there was, I think, Pribram, who did a bunch of research, including some LSD research, and showing how people under the influence of LSD could drop those borders and see They didn't see a line between people, that everyone was the same. And they found that this is very similar to people who are in psychotic states. Except for in a psychotic state, you can't reconcile what you've learned with your conscious mind, because your conscious mind is completely immersed in that. So that's all you know. It's hard to explain, but that we all have a little bit of a detachment from ourselves, but that our thought patterns are created by these wave interference patterns. And when people say that nothing's real till you touch it, of course we know that's not true, because that sets the precedence that humans somehow are the be-all, end-all of the universe. Of course not. The universe exists without us. We're just a part of it. It's the collective awareness that makes things exist, but it's also the universal observer. And people call that God. They try to name it. This is why so many cultures say there's no name of God. There's no way to name it. You have to name it the All, and that's the best anyone's ever come up with that I've heard. The All is all-consuming as everything. There's no difference between me and you. There's no difference between my hand and a rock on the moon. Yet, the different frequencies are what create the illusion. And I shouldn't have even used that word, because so many people are using the word frequency now as if we vibrate in a higher level, that kind of stuff. And I'd say, hey, wait a minute, back up for a minute. This is where we get out of the realm of, reality and into the realm of speculation, assuming we understand vibratory rates, or what it means to vibrate at a higher rate, or where we're going, if there is some universal mind, what it was creating in the first place, Carl Jung, he had some serious issues with psychiatry, because he believed in synchronicity, and he's the one who coined the term, I believe, the collective consciousness, which he didn't believe and then try to prove. It's something that came through what he did, and that's how much of this comes out. It's not that people are seeking these things, it's just that they keep presenting themselves over and over and over. And there are hundreds of scientific experiments that are ignored because they contradict what we want to believe. So when you dig into those, it becomes pretty convincing that there's something else going on outside of us. Carl Jung, he had one of his patients, and she had all these, serious issues with problems when she was younger and whatnot that she was trying to resolve. And she, in her therapies, she kept dreaming of these beetles, because Carl Jung would do dream psychotherapy, and he believed that the dream was the unconscious. But then he started getting people having dreams that they couldn't explain, things they shouldn't have known. People would dream. One guy said he got, spoken to with some weird random phone number and said, "Oh, call and tell my mom I'm okay." And he was going to ignore it, but he decided to dial the number. A lady answered, and her son had died 3 weeks before, and that's who had spoken. This got him really interested. One of his patients had been dreaming about a scarab beetle, and he knew that the scarab in Egyptian mythology was a symbol of rebirth. So he figured she was about to go through some transitional change. And right when they were talking about that, a scarab beetle came and landed on the window. And he said they'd never seen one before out there, and one had never landed on the window before. He opened the door and let it fly in, and I guess the whole situation changed. It was as if they'd opened a door to possibilities by allowing it to happen. And I think this is what I've taken away from this the most, is that if you close your mind to the potential that we are something greater than just mass and a brain, then you open up the door for those things to be revealed to you. And I should say, if you close your mind to it, you're not able to see those things. You will never see those things. They always say we see what we're looking for, and we're pattern seeking. So we become afraid to seek certain patterns because they're considered out there by society. It's one thing to believe in aliens or Bigfoot, but it's another thing to believe that we are, massless creatures of infinite wisdom, and we're all part of one giant brain. Yet billions of people throughout history have just known that in their hearts, and they just feel it. And trying to deny it, and watching from afar, and watching the people that deny it and the folks that accept it, I've seen that the ones who deny it seem to be pained. They seem to have inner pain that comes with resisting this. They become jaded. They become arrogant. They become hostile and combative to other people who believe in anything greater. They take it out on not just, people who are opposed to religion, take it out on anybody who believes anything outside of the norm. But that's just where the problem happens. Because you start looking at what the scientific norm is, and it's non-existent. There's a major paradigm of sticking with the paradigm in science, but there's also a huge other side of it that's ignored. Whenever a scientist comes forth with a paper that he wants to publish that shows something controversial, that may oppose hundreds of other studies that have been done, they're pushed away. They're laughed at. They're ridiculed. The journals won't publish it. And that's fine, because now with the internet we have the access to all of those papers. And I find dozens and dozens of small little tests that have been published. And one test doesn't say anything. But 10, 20, 30, 50, 1,000 tests, something starts to reveal itself. Science would have loved to dismiss the double slit experiment as a fluke, but it's been performed hundreds of times since then because people are so curious and it's such a simple experiment to do. It works every time. There are going to be things that we don't understand in this world. And I firmly believe that I'm coming to this point where over the last few years I've said, I'm not going to fool myself and just say I believe in reincarnation, or I believe in an afterlife, or I believe anything just because I want to believe it or because it comforts me. What I want to do is know it. I want to know it in my heart. And the more research I do, the more synchronicities happen to me, and the more things happen to show me that it's a much greater way of life to seek the mystical, yet still be open to the science. And I think we can all learn from each other. There's a little bit from consensus reality to show that there's something to the deeper heartfelt knowledge that we have, but that even science is starting to prove that things are much more complicated than we'll ever be able to understand. And yeah, that's what I got. Talk to you.